Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming back, Tarek, for your second session in a row. Thanks for joining us, Claudia and Lou. This is a session to give an overview of a resource that we have for you called Interview Stream. So with me today is my colleague, Chelsea Johnson, who's going to lead the presentation. I think all of you probably know by now kind of the rules of this session. We're going to go ahead and keep participants on mute during the presentation, but we do want to hear from you, so please use the chat function to type in any questions that you have as we go along. This session is also being recorded, so a link to the recording will be shared with you next week. And that's it. Hopefully this is a really fun interactive session covering this resource that we have. And again, if you get the opportunity, please do sign up for some of the other sessions that we have for you today and tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and throw our link into the chat box so that after this session, you can sign up for some other ones as well. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Chelsea.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. So yes, like Brianne said, I'm going to be going over our resource called Interview Stream. Just to kind of introduce myself here. My name again is Chelsea Johnson, and I am a career and industry specialist within our department. My specific industries or career interest communities that I focus on are education as well as communications and media. But yeah, I'm always excited about helping students and alumni prepare for their careers. And I think this is a useful tool to help students and alumni do that. So we'll get started. Something to kind of just think about, and you probably are very aware of this, but typically speaking, some types of interviews that people run into when they are applying for jobs, they'll usually be called in for something like a phone appointment. And when there isn't a pandemic going on, that will usually be followed by an in-person, but there are also virtual and recorded types of interviews, and obviously those are being used much more frequently right now. So one thing to keep in mind is with all of these types of interviews, this resource called Interview Stream will be able to help you with all of these. So it's really something that you can use along the way and prepare for any type of interview. So I'm going to share this kind of introduction video that Interview Stream put out to share about their product. And then we'll just kind of take it from there. Sorry, I don't think that you're all hearing the sound here. Trying to think how I can, maybe if I visit the YouTube, that'll be better. We'll try it.
Yeah, Chelsea, I think also if you stop sharing your screen and then reshare by also sharing your computer's audio, that's like an additional option.
Okay, so stop sharing and then reshare. Share computer sound, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry about that. New to some of these things here. So we'll just go ahead and try this again.
Let's face it, interviews can be pretty scary. I mean, you might say the wrong
Is that working?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
things, but I've got some great news for you. Now, thanks to your Career Center, you have access to the greatest, most revolutionary interview preparation software on the planet, Interview Stream. It's pretty great. With just the click of a mouse, you have access to over 7,000 pre-recorded interview questions to create your perfect mock interview. Whether you're preparing to land that dream job, a med school or post-grad interview, or just want to improve your response skills, InterviewStream can help. Using the link provided by your Career Center, create an account and immediately start accessing the robust InterviewStream prep platform. In addition to mock interviews, you can also view expert tips and webinars for more information and just a few pointers. From this screen, you can also jump right into your practice video interview. If your Career Center professional or professor has already created and assigned an interview to you, simply follow the instructional steps and start answering questions. If not, feel free to build your own interview using industry and subject-specific questions. Using your computer, laptop, or tablet device, you can complete your interview from anywhere at any time, perfect for your hectic and occasionally unusual schedule. Once you have completed your video mock interview, you can easily share a link to your responses with Career Center professionals, professors, mom and dad, and anyone else you want to receive a bit of feedback from. So what are you waiting for? Create your InterviewStream account today and start sharpening your skills now for that important interview coming soon.
All right. So we'll just kind of go through a couple of things here. I'm actually going to dive in and take you into the platform and look at it a little more closely than what they shared in that video. But some things to really consider and think about before you start diving in and creating mock interviews that are for whatever your needs are, and putting together questions. Really kind of have these in mind. Obviously, if you're going to be practicing for a very specific job that you are applying to, then you'll have more of an idea of what types of questions that you may be asked and that you can include in your mock interview. But if you're just preparing in general, and even if you are preparing for a specific job, these are some good things to think about and what to practice. So just knowing about these career competencies, which I'm sure if you have visited or seen another webinar that we've presented, that you have probably heard about these competencies. But these ultimately are the main skills or competencies that employers generally in the United States across all industries are looking for. So these employers were asked by the National Association of Colleges and Employers. They were asked basically the question, what do you look for in a candidate? So when you were hiring someone, what are the types of skills that you want most in that person? And these are the top skills that came up from their answers. So if you think about it, if you have questions in your mock interview that address some of these skills, then you can be reassured and know that most likely that is going to help you in your interview, because they will probably be in that interview be asking you about some of these skills, because these are generally the skills that employers want. So we actually also within InterviewStream, I'll show you what it looks like, but we have created mock interviews that focus on each one of these skills. So if you feel like, oh, I'm going to be applying for a job that is in a leadership role, so I really need to make sure that I know how to answer questions about leadership, then I would suggest going in and selecting that mock interview about leadership or any of the other skills that you feel confident that you would need in the job you're applying to. Something else to be aware of, if you're going in and creating a mock interview and you're picking your questions to choose, think about these typical types of questions that are asked in most every interview. So in pretty much every interview, you're going to get a mixture of each of these. And if you did listen in on the interview strategies webinar, you probably also went through these, but we'll just kind of go through them quickly. So many times you'll be asked traditional type questions in an interview. So obviously these are questions like, tell us more about yourself. What are your greatest strengths and weaknesses? We have many candidates, why should we hire you? Some of these types of questions. So those are good questions to include in your mock interviews in InterviewStream to practice. Behavioral questions, you can always bet that they will be in your interviews. So these are kind of like the story questions or experience type questions. So it's where they say something like, tell me about a time that this happened and how did you handle this? Or give an example of when you did this or this. So having those types of questions where your answer would be kind of a story, make sure that you pick those types of questions to include in your mock interview, because guarantee you will have to answer questions like that in a regular interview. Last of all, technical questions. Now this can depend on the industry. Some industries don't use these as much, but if you are in a STEM industry, a STEM type position, then you probably know already that you will be asked some of these types of technical questions. The nice thing with the interview stream is it has questions like that already in there that you can pick and choose from. All right, so with that, we're just going to dive into interview stream, and I'm going to show you the different features that there are. Again, just know that if you have questions at the end, I'll have some time to answer some of those, and you can feel free to put those in the chat box. All right, so let's go right in. As an ASU student, you have access. I'm going to actually have to log out to show you. You have access. You just need to go in with your your ASU email address. And then, so you can register there. So I'm just going to take you in as if you've already kind of registered, and we'll just take a look at it. All right, so let's take a look at the student view. Now, the first thing that I want to just kind of go over here is just generally showing you this initial page. Something to be aware of, if you are in a class where sometimes we actually have professors use interview stream, and usually for a class assignment where they would have members of their class go in and complete a certain mock interview that they have determined. So in that case, this is where you would put the code that they would give you. Something else to notice is there are some resources that we have listed here. Usually just kind of interview preparation type resources. So you can take a look at those as well. But the main function and kind of area that you'll be in are these two sections. Notice too that you can set up a mobile interview. Let's just show you here. It kind of gives you the details and instructions of how to get that set up if you want to use it from a device rather than your laptop or computer. So we'll first go into conduct an interview. This is obviously where you're going to want to click every time that you go into practice an interview. So there's two different options for you. Let's take a look at first at the created for me. So this is where you take some pre-made interviews. We're going to take a look at some of the options here that you can click on. So like I had mentioned before, we have created, and there's quite a few in here that you can take, but we have created interview sets that reflect those career competencies. So for example, communication career competency, the questions on here are all related to demonstrating your communication skills, critical thinking, digital technology. These are all the different career competencies. So if you really want to focus on, you feel like, oh, I feel like I am really good at, at teamwork, but I just don't know how to explain that or articulate that very well, then I think it would be a great idea for you to go into the teamwork and collaboration one and practice some of those questions to help you to know how to demonstrate just how good you are at teamwork. Some other kind of interview sets to take a look at. Some are really divided by industries. So there's STEM interview set ready for you to just go in and take. Pre-veterinarian, obviously there's some class assignment ones, there's internship, even different student groups, but definitely take a look at what's available there. Something that I actually would be interested to hear if somebody in the audience is interested, I'm actually going to show you what it looks like to go into one of these interviews. Is there a certain industry or career competency that you would like me to click on and take a look at? you can feel free to put that in the chat box if anyone has a request. All right, thank you. So we'll take a look and see if there's public health. You know, I think with that specific, they may not have that, but they do have public, social, and human services. So maybe we can take a look at that one. Let's see here. Okay, we'll just go ahead with that one. All right, so if you go in and just click the start interview, and actually something else I want to make sure that you're aware of. So you can also view questions beforehand. So if you were to click on that, then you can just go in and take a look at the questions.
What interests you in a career in public service?
And then just know beforehand. And so if you do want to do a little bit of preparation, then you can do it that way by taking a look. But also keep in mind too that in a regular interview, you're probably not going to know what questions they're going to ask. So it might be more worth a while to just go in and start the interview so that you are able to think on your feet and think quickly instead of knowing exactly what's going to be asked. But you have both those options for you. So we'll go ahead and start this interview, and I'll show you just the process of what it looks like. So you kind of have to do this hardware check here, and hopefully it'll let me do it while I'm sharing and doing this. It might not let me. I went through before and it was letting me, but it might not because of what I'm using. Just working through the technical difficulties. I'm just going to try another one and see if it does the same thing. Yeah, it might not let me, I'm sorry. We'll try another one here. So it is a fairly pretty self-explanatory, user-friendly process, but you would just test your audio and then it'll ask you the question and it'll give you a countdown and then you'll answer the question and then afterwards you'll just click when you're done and it'll give you the option to replay, to watch yourself and see how you answered. And that's important that you make sure to click that button because you want to see what you're doing. So you want to be able to see if you said many words that were unnecessary, words such as like or and also if you explained yourself well, if you used your hands a lot, like sometimes I do, that's a little distracting. So making sure that you're very conscious of some of those things. Let's see, so we'll actually go in, maybe this other side will give us more luck, but I wanted to make sure that we talked about the custom interview as well. So if you decide, okay, those are great interview sets that were prepared for me, but what I want to do is create my own, you can do that here. So let's see here. I'm just gonna go and type in a certain industry and see, actually, you might, yeah, there we are. So what I would suggest is just typing it or just going in and looking at different industries that you're interested in. So maybe just general engineering. So you'll notice here that there's some of the technical questions. So let's say I know I'm going to be asked probably some technical questions. So I'm just going to grab whichever question I want and drag it over here and place it in this box. And so that is now a selected question. Let's see. So for example, tell me about a time when you were confronted with a problem. We know that this is a behavior type question, and we already know that those are the types of questions that are going to be asked. So maybe I'll take one of those behaviors. So now I have a technical and I have a behavior question. So maybe if now I want to think about just some general questions, that maybe some of those traditional questions may come in. So let's actually come here. Yeah, it does have a nice general question list here with lots of different options. So let's just see here. General question list. Why is there a gap or something like that? Walk me through your career. Tell me how you decided. So maybe I'll do that one. Critical thinking, even describe a situation. Okay, so here's some of the questions that I think will be good that I can work on and use in my interview. So now I'm going to click on start my interview. Yeah, and so it's going to take you through that same exact process of how you go through and set it up. It'll ask you those questions. It'll also have an intro video to kind of just tell you, okay, this is what you need to do. Keep these things in mind as you're doing this interview. Now, when you do get to the end of the interview, it will give you this option. It'll give you a button that you can click on to say to share with your career center. So if you click on that button, then it's going to send it to our admin accounts and it's going to show up in our interviews that we need to go in and review that. So typically in our office, when we review those interviews, we'll be going in question by question, listening and watching your responses, and then we'll leave a comment underneath the question that you can see, just spelling out some suggestions we have for you, for that particular question and the answer you gave. Something else that it will give you an option to do is to click once you have it completed, and actually we can try and see if it'll show us in that other section, but it allows you to go in and kind of give yourself some critiques. So we'll exit out of this. Now, when you have some existing interviews that you've done, this is what this section is for. So watch my interview. Okay. So these were just some that I did really briefly, but what you have here underneath the title here, you have, would you hire you? Complete your assessment. So it's just here underneath the video. So you can go through, watch your answers here. And then something else that's kind of neat is you can count your filler words. So just simply listening in on what you've said throughout your video, and just click every time you hear yourself say or some of these other words. If you have a high number at the end of your answer or the interview, you know that's something that you probably need to work on. Simply because these words, these filler words, when you use them frequently in an interview, it makes it so that you sound less professional. So it's really important to kind of pay attention to those. Now here below is your self-assessment. So you can assess yourself based on some of these criteria here. You can select a rating and going in and just leaving that information for yourself so that you know, okay, this is something I need to work on. Next time I'm going to focus in on this. All right, so that's pretty much everything that I wanted to make sure to show you within Interview Stream. Now, it's nice because there's not a whole lot to have to work through. It's very basic. There's a section where you can take your interview and you can watch your recordings and assess yourself. So it's pretty easy to maneuver. And again, what I really like are all those questions that you can select from when you're trying to create your own interview. The search bar, has it's not the best as others, but when you go in, there's just so many ways and things you can take from and some options for you. So I'm going to go ahead and head back here. So that's pretty much everything with Interview Stream. So what we'll do now is I have a few minutes here with you, and I'm happy to take questions about Interview Stream. I'm happy to go back in if there's anything you noticed or want to go over. So feel free to put in the chat box if you have questions that you would like me to answer at this point. Thank you. I'm looking at the chat box here. So how do you send your interview to an employer or faculty? So that's a good question. Employers don't necessarily have access. From of my knowledge, they don't typically use Interview Stream for specific interviews for their company. If they do for any reason, then they should be able to provide you the information and contact and just the way that you would send it to them. Now, there is a way actually when you do finish an interview, it allows you to share just with anyone. So if you put in there an email address, so for example, it gives you that section there. And I wish I could go in, it's not letting me right now go in and show you what that looks like, but at the end of that interview, it'll give you that option to select how you can share, and then put in the email address of the person that you want to send it to. Faculty, yes, you can send it to their email addresses if that's something that you would like them to look at, but also there is that way of through assignment. So say a faculty member is using Interview Stream for an assignment in their class, they should have a code that you would put in that first screen. But if they do have another method of how they want you to share it, then they'll be able to spell that out for you. Sorry, that probably wasn't the most well-explained answer, but hopefully that answered your question. I'm actually gonna come back here real fast though. I wanna make sure. Thank you. Okay, here we are. Good, okay, so it is allowing me. So underneath, when you go to watch my interview and you are on your particular interview, you hit this share button and then you can share by email. And it looks like there's also this link that you can generate to share that way as well. So if that's something that an employer or a faculty member has requested, then that's a great way to go about it. Thank you for asking that. Anyone have any other questions?
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Chelsea, for this presentation. It's been really informative, and I want to thank everyone who attended this session today. Real quickly, I'll just highlight some of the other sessions that we're hosting today as well, in case you have some time to hop onto one of those. So our next session at noon, we actually have 2 sessions happening simultaneously. So we'll have one session exploring career competencies. So you've seen those in many of the presentations briefly, but if you'd like to really dive in and learn more about different career competencies, we'll have a session on that at noon. We will also have a session at noon on introductory conversations and personal narratives. So this is kind of like that first interview question, right? When they ask you, tell me about yourself, really being able to nail that answer. And then at 1 o'clock today, we have 2 more sessions. We have a business career interest community trends session, where we're gonna have some folks from WP Carey really talking about industry trends in business. So for anyone who's interested in that field, you'll get lots of insider tips on what to look for in that field. And then we also have a career interest community trends session for public, social, and human services. So both of those are at 1 o'clock today. So thanks again for joining us. Link to the recording will be made available to you next week, and hope to see you again soon. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.